Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere impossibly hot, blindingly bright, and strangely full of ice. You're in ancient Persia, right around the edge of the Dashti Kavir Desert. The sun's already high even though it's early morning, and you're trudging through a plain so dry that even the wind sounds parched. Every step kicks up a puff of dust, and it sticks to the back of your throat like powdered chalk. The air shimmers, the earth radiates heat, and somewhere out there, far beyond reason, people are making ice. Not finding it. Not trading for it. Making it. You probably won't survive this if you showed up wearing flip-flops and brought nothing but good intentions. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk through a Persian village where the buildings seem to rise directly from the earth. Sun-dried mud bricks stack into quiet little houses with flat roofs and no windows facing the street. There's no need for fanfare out here, just function. Occasionally, a splash of glazed tile or a painted lintel suggests someone inside still has the energy for beauty. Out in the square, the market is just starting to stir. A boy sweeps sand from the front of his family's spice stall, a practice which, given the desert, is about as effective as brushing crumbs off a sandcastle. He pauses to squint up at something in the distance, shielding his eyes. You follow his gaze? There it is, a dome. Pale, conical, and unlike any other building around it. Its sides are fluted, like frozen ripples. You might mistake it for a grain silo, until you notice the deep shadows clinging to its base and the subtle frostiness to the air nearby, like someone cracked open a door to winter. This is your first glimpse of a yakshal. Literal translation? Ice pit. Emotional translation? How on earth did they manage this? You're tempted to walk right up and put your palm against the wall, but the sun says otherwise. Instead, you meander to a shaded corner where a group of older men are playing a slow-moving game with stones on a wooden board. One of them, perhaps sensing your curiosity or just bored of losing, leans toward you and points a knotty finger at the dome. Cold lives there, he says, with a grin missing 3 molars. You try to imagine what he means. You think of your own fridge at home humming along without much effort. Electricity, compressors, the works. But here, there are no power lines. Just sky, sand, and a centuries-old problem. How do you keep something cold in the middle of a desert where summer temperatures routinely hit 40 degrees Celsius 104 degrees Fahrenheit or more? The answer, as you're about to learn, is a slow, deliberate miracle of architecture, science, and honestly, a fair bit of wishful thinking. Because back in those days, making ice in Persia wasn't just some quirky party trick. It was life-saving, status-defining, and weirdly poetic. Even the timing had to be perfect. Snow and ice were harvested in the coldest months, sometimes trucked down from mountains wrapped in straw, other times made in shallow pools that froze overnight thanks to radiation cooling. Historians still argue whether the first yakshals were inspired by simple underground storage pits, by mountain-dwelling snow collectors, or perhaps by older cooling methods from Egypt or Mesopotamia. What's clear is that by the 5th century BCE, possibly earlier, Persians had perfected an entire ecosystem around cold storage. But don't worry, you're not going to school tonight. You're going to nap your way through a quiet little empire of thermal engineering. Back in the square, a young girl balances a shallow tray of pomegranates on her head. She walks past you without a sound, and for a moment, you follow her down a narrow alley. The walls here are higher and closer, channeling what little breeze there is into a whisper of relief. You notice more domes now, smaller, half-hidden behind walls or attached to houses like cooling tumors. Some are obviously in use. Others lean with age, their plaster cracked, their secrets leaking into the dry wind. The idea of ice, of cold anything, still seems laughable here. And yet, a merchant strolls by with a small clay cup filled with something pale and slushy, like an ancient snow cone. He dips a spoon in, takes a lazy bite, and doesn't even flinch at the absurdity of it. Your feet crunch over gravel and drift sand. A lizard skitters away. Somewhere, a donkey brays as if also skeptical about all this cold talk. But something changes as you step closer to the big dome. The air feels different. Not cool exactly, but less aggressive. Less loud. The sun isn't pounding on your skull anymore, it's just patting you gently like it's slightly embarrassed. You place a hand against the outer wall. Warm, but not hot. Like the skin of a sleeping cat in shade. You close your eyes. Somewhere below your feet, under that smooth dome, beneath layers of insulation, ash, and lime mortar, is a vault of ice. Not metaphorical ice. Not a poetic metaphor for inner peace. Actual, glistening, frozen water. Waiting. And the best part? This isn't the strangest thing you'll see today. You follow a narrow footpath that winds behind the dome, led by instinct more than intention. It hugs the base of the Yakshal where tiny purple flowers grow in the cracks of sun-baked earth survivors with stubborn roots. There's no sound except the scuff of your sandals and the occasional coo of a pigeon nesting in the crevices overhead. Then you see them. A procession of figures trudging steadily through the lowlands outside the town, almost ghost-like in the distance. Men, women, even a few children wrapped in coarse wool cloaks, moving with the solemn purpose of monks. Their pace is slow but sure. Each one balances a wide, shallow tray or carries a basket on their back, and what they're bringing isn't grain or dates. It's snow. Packed, precious, and already melting in the edges. You blink against the brightness, half convinced you're hallucinating because there's no snow in sight. But then you remember, this is winter. The desert disguises it well, but for a few weeks each year, the nearby mountains wear a crown of white. There, in the early morning hours, the villagers have trekked up the narrow mule paths, loaded snow onto straw-lined sleds, and are now bringing it back like pilgrims carrying relics. And relics they are. In a world without refrigeration, this snow is both luxury and necessity. It will cool the water, preserve the food, and if stored properly, last well into the brutal summer months. Every flake matters. One man walks past you, nods politely, and you notice his beard is stiff with frost. He's traveled far. You join the line, not because you're helping necessarily, but because the silence invites you. As you reach the edge of town again, the path opens into a dusty clearing beside the main Yakshal. There's a sunken ramp leading underground, angled steeply and lined with stone. At the bottom lies a dark, yawning mouth into the storage chamber. The snow carriers descend without hesitation, their feet familiar with every wobble and dip in the stones. You follow behind, and instantly the temperature drops. It's like stepping into a breath that was held for months. The air smells faintly of lime and wet clay. Walls curve around you, thick with plaster and quiet purpose. A few oil lamps flicker in niches, but otherwise, this world is half shadow, half chill. You stand to the side as the snow is poured into a pit, layered carefully between bundles of straw, each pat and press sealing it tighter than the last. And it's done without talking. These people don't need words for this. They've been doing it for generations. Historians still debate whether these winter rituals were strictly practical or carried spiritual weight. Some believe the act of preserving cold in a sun-dominated land had religious significance, a triumph of balance, or perhaps just a rare chance to tell the sun to calm down. An older woman sits by the entry ramp, sewing long strips of linen. You watch her dip the fabric into a clay jar filled with something thick and fragrant. Pomegranate molasses, maybe, and press it into a slab of packed snow. She hums softly, a tune with more rhythm than melody, and folds the strip like a frozen scroll. You catch a whiff of something herbal in the air, mint, perhaps, or wormwood. And suddenly, the cold seems medicinal. Not just pleasant, but healing. Someone brushes past you carrying a wooden crate filled with small ceramic cups. He sets them down and begins ladling a sweet, slushy drink into each. You're handed one without a word. It tastes like mulberries and snow. You sip slowly, eyes adjusting to the dimness. The dome above your head is invisible now, but you feel it, a quiet pressure, like being inside a giant sleeping animal. You marvel at the engineering, how the builders knew to insulate the walls with a special mortar mix, to angle the dome for optimal airflow, to design it so the water from melting snow trickles into a hidden drainage system instead of flooding the chamber. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is accidental. You trace your hand along the curved wall, the surface surprisingly smooth. It's lined with a waterproof render made from sand, clay, egg whites, goat hair, and ash, a combination that somehow keeps everything dry. Someone definitely licked a lot of walls figuring that out. A child giggles nearby. She's helping pack straw, humming off-key. Her mother shushes her gently but not harshly. There's a reverence here, but it's not strict. It's sleepy like everything else. You lean against a post and close your eyes for a moment. In the hush of the underground, time feels suspended. The snow may not see sunlight again for months, maybe longer. And when it does, it'll be in the form of icy drinks, cool compresses, and luxurious desserts served on golden trays. Some of it might even be sold, a little bit at a time, to nobles or physicians. But for now it sleeps. And outside, the desert pretends it doesn't know what's going on beneath its feet. You slowly climb the ramp again, blinking into the afternoon light. The snow carriers are gone now. The courtyard is quiet. A single rooster wanders through, pecking at the dust. Above you, the Yakshal stands unchanged. Silent. Stoic. A cold miracle in a land of fire. You move away from the Yakshal, stepping back into the labyrinth of the village. The day has warmed to its fullest now, and yet, after that cool chamber, everything feels just a little less oppressive. Even the dust seems to float more lazily. As you walk, your eyes adjust to the slow shimmer of heat rising off rooftops. Beyond the town walls, you spot long, narrow channels of water slicing through the dry earth, some covered, some open to the sky. These are kanats, ancient underground aqueducts that bring snowmelt from far-off mountains into the heart of the village. If the Yakshal is a freezer, the kanats are the plumbing. And like most Persian inventions, they were built not just to work, but to last. You crouch beside one, dipping your fingers into the flow. The water is shockingly cold, colder than makes sense under a sky like this. But that's the genius of the system, it runs beneath the surface, away from the sun's meddling fingers. Gravity does the rest, pulling the water across miles with barely a whisper. Some of these kanats stretch for tens of kilometers. And they weren't just for drinking or farming. The water, kept cool underground, would be diverted into shallow basins at night, artificial ponds designed to capture cold air. As the desert sky radiated its heat into space, the water slowly froze over. Not every night, but enough nights. You rub your fingers together, still tingling from the chill. Historians still argue whether this passive freezing technique was learned from nomadic tribes, stumbled upon by accident, or imported from India or China. But what's not debated is its elegance. These basins were often flanked by wind catchers, badgers, tall towers designed to funnel cool night air down into the freezing ponds. You glance up. There, rising like narrow sails above the rooftops, are the badgers. Some square, some octagonal. They look like stone periscopes from a shipwrecked steampunk dream. And they work. A breeze grazes your cheek, drawn in through one of the towers and guided down into a home below. Inside, someone sighs contentedly. You wander through a quieter part of the village now, where the buildings are taller and the courtyards deeper. You peek through an open archway and see a woman ladling cold water into clay pitchers, each one designed with a bulbous bottom and narrow neck, shapes that limit evaporation and keep the contents cool. In one corner of the courtyard, you spot an enormous clay urn, half buried in the earth and wrapped in linen. These Zaire-zameen pots functioned like fridges, part below ground, always shaded, and periodically doused in water to encourage evaporative cooling. There's no single tool here that made ice. But that's the magic. It's a whole lifestyle engineered around preserving coolness, using only the earth, wind, and stars. You pass under a wooden trellis covered in grapevines. The shade is patchy, but enough to make the walk feel pleasant. Somewhere nearby, children laugh as they splash their feet in a tiled fountain. The water's surface is rippling with light. You sit down beside the fountain and lean back. Let's not pretend this was paradise. People still suffered through scalding heat, still lost crops and patience, and probably their sanity. But these systems, kanats, badgers, freezing pools, shadow architecture, offered control in a climate that gave very little of it freely. And yes, okay, they were also a flex. The wealthier households didn't just store ice, they flaunted it. Hosting feasts in the summer with chilled rosewater, or serving faluda, a frozen vermicelli dessert still loved today in Iran. Nothing says, "I am very rich," like handing your guests a bowl of snow in July. Still, the effort wasn't purely indulgent. Ice also played a key role in medicine. Persian doctors believed in balancing the humors, hot, cold, wet, dry, and nothing cooled an overheated liver or inflamed temperament like a cloth soaked in Yakshal chilled water. One elderly apothecary you pass nods in your direction, then lifts a jar of white powder, probably powdered lotus or licorice, toward the heavens as if blessing the breeze. The streets grow narrower now. Your shoulders brush the walls. You're led by the scent of damp earth and rose petals. In a small alcove, you find a public drinking basin, shaded by a wooden awning and kept filled from the kanat system. Above it hangs a ceramic plaque etched with poetry. You can't read the Persian script, but a boy nearby offers a translation. "Let the sun rage. This water remains gentle." You smile. It's not a challenge, it's a whisper, a quiet triumph of patience over pressure. You close your eyes again. This town, with all its humble genius, wasn't rare. Across ancient Persia, from Yaz to Kerman, villages and cities used these techniques to beat the heat without metal, motors, or magic. They mapped the land, studied the wind, and listened to the cold. And even now, with modern air conditioning humming in every corner of the world, some of these yakshals and kannets are still quietly working, still catching coolness in a net made of earth and air, still waiting for the next tired traveler to step into their shade. You leave the narrow shade of the village behind and step into a wide orchard at the edge of town. The trees here are squat and heavy-limbed, thick with pomegranates, figs, and dates. It's clear someone's been tending them well, every branch supported, every root line fed by a quiet trickle of water from a hidden cannon. You walk slowly, your sandals brushing against the pale dust, occasionally crunching over a fallen fruit. The sun is still high, but there's a quiet coolness in the air, as if the trees themselves are breathing it into existence. Nestled among the roots, you spot something unusual, half-buried clay amphorae with wide mouths, each sealed with a waxy cloth. You lift the edge of one, and a puff of cold air kisses your fingers. Inside, syrupy preserves cooled by the same ancient principles you've already seen in action. It's not just ice these people stored. They stored coolness itself. Nearby, an elderly man with a wide sun hat waves you over. He's standing beside a raised platform made of stone and packed earth. On top of it sits what looks like a cross between a bird bath and a shallow tub. Surrounding the platform are dozens of small clay bowls, each filled with something different: rosewater, vinegar, date syrup, even milk. The man smiles, gestures to the platform, and mimics the motion of the stars above. You quickly realize this is a primitive version of a freezing pan used only on the coldest desert nights. The bowls were set out under the open sky, left to chill as the dry night air pulled heat upward into the void of space. The technique is deceptively simple. Shallow containers, placed wide apart, freeze better than deep ones close together. You think about your freezer back home and suddenly feel like a complete amateur. Historians still debate whether the ancient Persians discovered this technique independently or whether it migrated over centuries from Indian subcontinent innovations in evaporative cooling. Either way, this orchard-turned-laboratory would have been a busy place during winter's darkest nights, and a sleepy one by dawn. You sit beside the platform as the old man hands you a tiny clay bowl of something thick and golden. It smells like honey and saffron and tastes, when you finally try it, like the desert just learned how to whisper. He tells you through half-gestures and cheerful mutterings that in his childhood his grandmother would layer snow and grape molasses in a copper pot and beat it into a soft sherbet. It wasn't just dessert, it was celebration. You thank him in your best attempt at Persian, and he nods in the universal language of close enough. You rise and continue along the orchard path, now winding downhill. In the distance, you see a long, low structure with arched doorways and faded blue tiles. The bathhouse. But before you reach it, you spot something curious, a narrow sunken trench flanked by polished stones. It leads toward the yakshal again, different from the kannets you saw earlier. This one is lined with glazed ceramic and it's exposed to the air. You kneel beside it and touch the surface of the water. Still cold. This was a seasonal stream, likely diverted during winter to fill open-air cooling ponds and freeze reservoirs. Some towns even built ice houses with shallow external pools attached, designed so water would freeze overnight and the resulting ice could be broken up and stored inside. Not quite ice factories, but close. Your mind drifts to how many people it would have taken to keep these systems running. Laborers hauling snow, potters shaping cooling jars, engineers whispering with the wind to figure out optimal building angles. Even the poets got involved, penning verses that praised water that forgets it is water. The bathhouse looms closer now. A young boy passes you with an armful of towels and a basket of rose petals. He disappears through an archway and you follow. Inside, it's dim and fragrant. The air is thick with the smell of sandalwood and steam. Pools ripple gently under lantern light. But in one corner, behind a half-curtained partition, is something unexpected, a cool room. No steam, no heat, just silence and chill. You enter. The walls are thick, the floor packed with smooth stone tiles. A narrow ventilation shaft whistles faintly above. Clay pots filled with cold water sit in niches. You touch one and it's genuinely cold, not tepid, not lukewarm. Cold. The attendant inside, an older woman with henna-stained fingertips, offers you a seat on a cushioned bench. She mists your face with rosewater, then presses a cloth soaked in snow melt to your temples. You sit in silence, letting the sensation seep into your scalp, your eyes, the roots of your thoughts. It's easy to forget in the modern world just how loud heat can be. But here, in this quiet little room carved out of dust and ingenuity, the absence of heat feels like a lullaby. And just for a moment, you wonder if this is what it felt like, long ago, to be a king. Not because you're pampered, but because you've touched something rare, coolness, in a world not designed to offer it. A quiet victory against the inevitable. You step back out into the light, blinking against the sudden gold of the afternoon. The bathhouse fades behind you, a pocket of cool wrapped in steam and stone. Now you follow a narrow path winding past adobe walls baked hard by decades of sun. Your sandals crunch against gravel as you reach a sloping hillside. Here, the landscape changes again. Terraced farms step down toward a dry basin, and at the base of one wall you spot a familiar shape. A squat dome around, earthen with a small, vented peak. Another yakshal. But this one isn't attached to any palace or noble household. It's a communal version. A child in dusty linen sprints past you, chasing a bouncing ball. Behind him, a group of women balance baskets on their heads, wrapped in shawls of pale green and indigo. They pass into the dome, and you follow from a respectful distance. Inside, the air is cool and damp. You recognize the same deep pit structure, the same lime-plastered walls. But instead of silence, there's activity. Laughter, low voices, clinking jars. They're exchanging preserved goods. Cold yogurt sealed in animal skin pouches, slabs of half-frozen cheese wrapped in leaves, containers of melted snow flavored with herbs. One woman offers you a taste, a milky, tangy sip that lingers like lemon and ash. This yakshal isn't just storage. It's a kind of community freezer/meeting place. A place where people share not only ice, but stories, recipes, gossip. Historians still argue whether these structures were originally temple-connected, maintained by Zoroastrian priests, or civic projects funded by early urban guilds. Either way, over time, they became a kind of social refrigerator, coolness shared as both necessity and generosity. As you exit, someone places a sprig of mint in your hand. You sniff it absently and keep walking. Back outside, you turn toward the basin at the end of the terraced slope. A large reflective pool stretches before you, ringed with tall reeds. You kneel to examine it. This is a sarouge-lined freezing pool, wide and shallow, designed to turn surface water into ice overnight. The walls are angled just right to trap the least bit of chill from the desert night sky. The desert doesn't get cool gently, it drops. Fast. Like a magician yanking a cloth off a table. And when the heat leaves, the water, if it's spread thin enough, obeys. It hardens. Villagers would wait for the frostiest nights to lay these pools out. The next morning, the ice would be cracked into slabs, stacked in sledges or carts, and ferried to the yakshal. Covered in straw. Wrapped in wool. Sometimes the pools even had canals running from nearby cannots to refill them automatically. One elderly man you meet by the pool tells you, through a wide, gap-toothed grin, that when he was a boy, his job was to sing to the water at night. Not because it helped it freeze, but because the silence felt too loud. You chuckle. You've probably talked to your refrigerator before, too. As the sky starts to tint toward amber, you take one last look at the pool. It reflects the horizon in a dull shimmer. You imagine it frozen over, its surface glittering like glass under a winter moon. Ice in the desert still feels impossible. And yet here it is. You climb back up the hill and pause at the top. Below you, the whole system unfurls like a quiet diagram. The terraces for collecting water, the channels that guide it, the freezing pools, the yakshal, the village. An entire civilization orchestrating heat and cold without electricity. It wasn't magic. It was science, patience, and, let's be honest, a little bit of stubbornness. You head back toward the town, passing a young couple setting up a night stall. They're selling charat, iced drinks with basil seeds, honey, and dried lime. You watch them pour a ladle of snowy slush into a tall glass and sprinkle the top with saffron. The customer sips it like nectar. No fast food. No machines. Just cold harvested from the bones of the desert. You buy one yourself. It tastes like lemon, sweetness, and a tiny, defiant victory against physics. As dusk seeps across the sky, you follow the flickering oil lamps down a gently curving path toward the edge of the settlement. The golden light pools on the stone walkway, leading your steps as if guiding you deeper into some shared desert memory. The air has shifted again. It's cooler now. Still dry, still scented with dust and distant rosewater, but laced with that crisp bite only twilight in the desert brings. Up ahead is something you hadn't noticed earlier. A low, rectangular pavilion surrounded by squat brick pillars. Several elderly men sit cross-legged beneath its sloped roof, talking quietly over cups of cool tea. One of them calls out in a sing-song voice and pats the stone next to him. You oblige, settling beside him with a tired sigh. He smiles, reaches into a woven basket, and pulls out a handful of something brittle and white, shaved ice, pressed with dried herbs. He explains, in broken phrases, that these were once called yakbatsi, ice treats, handed out during festivals or royal weddings. Not just desserts, but offerings. Symbols of wealth, craftsmanship, and what he calls, with a twinkle in his eye, the ability to bend fire backward. You grin. That might be your favorite phrase so far. While you nibble on your slightly minty, slightly sandy treat, he begins to tell you stories. Stories about caravans coming in from the mountains in winter, carrying bundles of snow wrapped in animal skins. About hidden storage pits lined with camel wool. About children daring each other to sneak into the cold rooms and stick their tongues to the jars. Some of these stories, you suspect, have grown taller over the decades. One involves a goat, a priest, and a runaway block of ice. You don't follow every detail, but the laughter is infectious. Historians still argue about when the Persian knowledge of ice-making was at its peak. Some place it firmly in the Achaemenid period, others in the later Safavid era. The truth may be, as always, layered in both. Innovation waxed and waned depending on climate, empire budgets, and how many engineers weren't busy being conscripted into whatever the king's newest palace project was. The man offers you a second treat, this one soaked in rose syrup. You accept. It's astonishingly refreshing. Then he points behind the pavilion toward a series of faint mounds. You hadn't noticed them earlier, but now, in the dimming light, their shapes stand out against the sand. You excuse yourself and wander closer. These are abandoned yakshals, half-buried domes, their ventilation shafts caved in, their walls cracked by time. Some have been overtaken by shrubs and wild fig trees. But even in ruin, they hold their dignity. You imagine the teams of workers who once maintained them, plastering the interiors with fresh lime, sweeping out debris, resacking the ice. Imagine the desert nights when their walls hummed with cold air swirling downward like an invisible waterfall of winter. You place your hand against one. The wall is warm now, of course, sun-baked and crumbling. But if you close your eyes, you can almost feel the memory of cold vibrating just beneath the surface. There's something intimate about standing beside a ruin that once stored ice. It's not like a battlefield or a ruined palace, no glory or grandeur here. Just proof of care. Proof that people, hundreds or even thousands of years ago, wanted to preserve a fleeting moment, the cool touch of night. You hear a soft creak behind you and turn to see a boy riding a donkey, delivering small parcels wrapped in palm leaves. He stops by the pavilion, exchanges a few with the elderly men, and rides on. You wave. He waves back. A moment passes. And then, curiosity getting the better of you, you follow his trail. You're not quite sure where you're going, but the donkey seems to know. The donkey's hooves patter softly against the packed earth, guiding you through a series of winding back lanes where the air grows colder by degrees. Overhead, the last threads of twilight fade into a rich, velvety blue. You trail behind at a respectful distance, letting the donkey lead you without pressure, its little hooves moving with the steady confidence of someone who's made this journey more times than it can count. Eventually, the boy and donkey disappear through an arched gate flanked by ancient cypress trees. You approach slowly, your footsteps swallowed in silence. Inside, oil lanterns cast a honeyed glow over what appears to be a quiet residential garden, ornamental pools, slender footpaths, clusters of grapevines climbing up trellises. And then you see it, another yakshal, but this one is partially sunken, flanked by narrow channels of still water. It's beautiful. Simple. Reverent. This isn't just another ice house. This one feels personal. The boy reemerges, carrying a bundle of cloths, thin towels, perhaps, and vanishes into a side building. You don't follow. Instead, you take a seat on a low stone wall and inhale the faint scent of ripening fruit. Before you can wonder aloud, a woman appears carrying a small clay pot. She sits near you, smiling, then pours 2 cups of seconjabin, a tangy drink made from vinegar, sugar, and mint, often served chilled in the warm months. It's delicious. Somehow both sweet and sharp, like a cold joke whispered in a library. She doesn't speak much, just nods toward the yakshal and makes a spiraling gesture with her finger. You understand. Spiral down. Look inside. You do. The dome's opening is narrow and you peer down carefully. A rope ladder hangs along one side, sturdy and worn. No one stops you, so you descend. Inside, the chamber is silent, so still that you can hear your heartbeat echo faintly against the walls. Your feet land on a packed clay floor, and you pause, letting your eyes adjust. To your surprise, it isn't empty. There are bundles wrapped in linen, stacked carefully along the edges. A few clay jars. One large slab of something, maybe old ice, maybe salted goat cheese, half covered with straw. The temperature drop is immediate and calming. It's not freezing, but it's the kind of cold that wraps gently around your arms like cool silk. And here's where the story deepens. This particular yakshal, the woman above later tells you, once belonged to a healer, a woman known throughout the region for using ice and herbs to treat fevers, swelling, even childbirth complications. Locals would come to her with sprigs of lavender, pouches of dried myrtle, or small coins, and she would offer them compresses, chilled ointments, or mint-scented waters to ease the pain. Historians still debate whether such figures were officially sanctioned or worked outside the formal structures of Persian medicine. But the legacy of these ice women lingers in folk tales, herbal recipes, and the whispered advice of grandmothers. You sit in the cool quiet for a while, imagining her there, mixing remedies, wrapping cloths around blocks of frost, applying them to a child's fevered brow while the desert sun roared just beyond the walls. It's a kind of medicine born not from conquest or empire, but from softness, patience, timing, the knowledge of how long water takes to freeze, how mint opens the breath, how cold shrinks pain. Eventually, you climb back out. The woman is gone, but the cup she gave you sits waiting on the wall, still beaded with condensation. Still cold. You drink the last of it and stand. The donkey's long gone. The boy too. But the path forward is marked with a faint trail of lanterns leading east. You follow. The desert is different at night, quieter, yes, but also somehow wider. The stars feel impossibly close. You walk for what could be minutes or hours, lulled by the crunch of sand beneath your feet and the fading warmth from the ground. And then, in the distance, you see it, another village, another dome, another whisper of cold held carefully inside the world's hottest places. You smile. You're starting to get the hang of this. You arrive just as the village wakes. It's an early hour, too early for most, but here, in this tiny Persian outpost clinging to the desert's hip bone, life follows different rhythms. You pass a baker kneading dough by lantern light, his arms dusted with flour like he's been playing in snowfall. A rooster calls somewhere. A sleepy dog lifts its head, sighs, and decides whatever you're up to isn't its business. As the sun peaks over the horizon, you spot yet another yakshal, this one unlike the others. It's short, squatter, and capped with what looks like an accidental hat. A dome within a dome, with curved vents spiraling upward like the chimneys of a spaceship designed by potters. You pause to admire the design. This, a nearby man tells you between yawns, is a sister dome. It's a backup yakshal used exclusively for preparing and storing a summertime specialty known as faluda, a dessert made of vermicelli noodles frozen in syrup delicately perfumed with rosewater. You raise an eyebrow. Frozen noodles in the desert? Why not? The man laughs and beckons you inside. You're led past a small garden, through a narrow archway and into a humble open-air kitchen. There, two women are already at work. One stirs a mixture in a deep metal bowl. The other breaks apart tiny threads of pasta, cooling them in a basin set into the ground. A third stands near the yakshal entrance, ladling the syrup mixture into shallow trays and sending them down by pulley to chill. The whole system works like a slow, rhythmic dance. Stir, lift, pour, lower, repeat. The air smells of lemon and rose petals. You sit in the corner watching the faluda crystallize. There's a kind of music to it, the scrape of metal on clay, the quiet clink of glass lids, the rustle of linen wrapping bundles of ice. Historians still argue whether the invention of faluda predates the more famous sorbets of the Islamic Golden Age or evolved alongside them. Some even suggest the technique may have influenced medieval Italian and French frozen desserts centuries later. Others, rather diplomatically, say that perhaps everyone just really likes cold sweets when it's hot. You're handed a small bowl and take your first bite. It's firm and slippery at once, scented like a garden dream, and cold enough to make your teeth ache in the nicest possible way. The woman laughs at your expression. Eat slowly, she says. Cold takes its time. You nod. Seems only fair. As you finish, a breeze picks up through the vents above, and the yakshal responds like a breathing creature, pulling the hot air out, coaxing the coolness deeper in. You lean back, letting the silence stretch. Then someone taps your shoulder. A small boy again. Could be the same one from earlier. Could be a different one. You're not sure anymore. He hands you a tightly rolled scroll. You unroll it to find a hand-drawn map, childlike in its lines but precise in its destination. Another village. Another dome. A symbol beside it, this time a crescent moon and a jar. You glance up. The women nod. Go, one of them says, as if the idea had already been agreed upon long before you arrived. So you do. The next leg of your journey is quieter, more dreamlike. The desert seems to part before you now, offering pathways with the grace of a well-trained host. You lose track of time and maybe distance too. Eventually, just as the air warms again, you reach the next site. A small collection of stone buildings clusters around a central plaza where a yakshal rises, not domed, but faceted like a gemstone, its edges sharp as folded paper. This one is different. It once served the court apothecaries, those charged with preparing cooling treatments not for the masses, but for royalty. Kings and queens, queens' uncles, and the sort of minor cousins who insisted they needed chilled honey for headaches. Here, cold was medicinal, but also ceremonial. Ice was steeped in saffron and gold dust. Jars were labeled in 4 languages. Music was played during the preparation of certain recipes to honor the balance of the humors or perhaps just to keep the assistants from falling asleep mid-task. One slab of stone bears a faded inscription, "To cool the heart is to quiet the state." You trace the letters with your finger. It's a lovely thought. The air inside this dome is the coldest yet. Not unfriendly, just serious. The kind of cold that reminds you to breathe slower, to think before speaking, to sit still and let the world unfold. You do exactly that. You linger inside the gemstone-shaped yakshal for what feels like both minutes and centuries. The stillness is meditative, broken only by the faint drip of melting frost and the whisper of your own breathing. Eventually, you emerge, squinting into the sunlight. The plaza has shifted, somehow emptier, brighter, a little softer at the edges, like a dream you've walked in too long. You're not alone. A tall man in a scholar's robe stands beside a wheeled cart. His beard is ink-stained, his fingers smudged with charcoal. He nods toward you and then gestures at the cart, which is filled with scrolls, bundles of dried herbs, and oddly enough, a basket of snowballs wrapped in cloth. "Lesson time," he says plainly. You follow him down a narrow path bordered by tamarisk trees. He talks as he walks, and you quickly realize he's not actually talking to you, he's talking at you like a professor who's thrilled to finally have an audience again. "Most people think Persians stored ice for food or fever," he begins. "But what if I told you we also used it to write?" You raise an eyebrow. He grins. "Inks stored cold keep their consistency. Scrolls written with chilled ink dry slower. Makes them harder to smudge. We used ice not just to preserve, but to create." You arrive at a shaded courtyard lined with benches. On a table, laid out like sacred offerings, are delicate manuscripts, brushes, and tiny clay pots. The man invites you to sit. He unwraps one of the snowballs and places it in a shallow ceramic bowl. As it melts, he dips a brush into the chilled water, then into a pigment and begins writing. His letters are slow, deliberate, tiny black ripples across parchment. "This is how we copied the Shahnameh in midsummer," he explains, "or kept maps from curling. Even cooled wax seals so they wouldn't crack under the sun." You lean over a scroll and read a line aloud. Something about rust-colored horses and a battle that took place where the rivers met salt. The characters are so elegant they feel like wind tracing itself across the page. He smiles. "We say cold quiets the hand. That's why the best copyists worked near yakshals. Precision, patience, those come with chill. You try it. Dip. Stir. Stroke. Your letters wobble at first, but soon they settle. The cold water does help, somehow. It slows you down, steadies your grip. You're not drawing words, you're placing them. Outside, the day blooms hot again, but here in this shaded world of ice water, ink, and ancient paper, time contracts. Historians still debate how widespread this practice was. Some dismiss it as local eccentricity. Others argue that chilling materials was a deliberate technique passed through scribe guilds like a whispered spell. Still others claim the stories are just romantic flourishes, literary chill, not literal. The scholar shrugs at the debate. "What matters is that it worked," he says, handing you a page you wrote. "Look at that. No smears. No sweat drops. Just quiet." You tuck the page into your satchel. Before you leave, he hands you something else, a round, smooth token made of glazed clay. On one side, the carved symbol of a yakshal. On the other, a tiny spiral, your familiar guidepost now. "You'll need this for the next part," he says, already gathering up his scrolls again. "Tell them I sent you. Or don't. Either way, you'll get there." You thank him and step back into the brightness. You follow the spiral. This time, your journey takes you along a dry riverbed, cracked and fossil-marked, where tiny lizards dart ahead of your steps. There's no wind, no sound, just the steady crunch of your sandals and the faint slosh of melted faluda sloshing in your stomach. Eventually, you spot it, another dome. But this one looks half swallowed by the land, like it's sinking, or maybe being slowly eaten by the earth itself. You descend toward it. There are no villagers this time. No donkeys, no children, no second jabbin'. Just you, the dome, and a faint scent of dust and dried roses. You enter. And inside? Shelves. Dozens of shelves lining the interior walls. Not with ice. Not with food. With jars. Each jar labeled in Persian calligraphy. Some hold dried herbs. Others, powders. A few of rolled bits of fabric soaked in unknown substances. But at the center, under soft light, sits a single slab of translucent mineral, cold to the touch, smooth as polished bone. A preserved block of something ancient. Maybe ice. Maybe salt. This is the yakshal of recipes, you realize. A preservation vault not for food, but for knowledge. Cold knowledge. Medicinal scrolls. Culinary secrets. Perfume formulas. Ice was used here not to numb, but to remember. You step closer and begin to read. You sit before the slab of cold knowledge, breath fogging slightly in the air. Yes, even here, beneath the scorched ceiling of the desert, the chamber manages to keep a chill. Not a freezer's bite, but something calmer. Wiser. You run your hand across the stone and feel the history humming through it. Cold has a memory, you begin to think. And someone, long ago, figured out how to use it to make memory last. On the shelves around you, jars wait like patient students. You lift one. Inside, curled strips of dried quince peel, labeled in looping Persian script as a remedy for a sour heart and disobedient digestion. Another jar is filled with indigo-dyed cloth soaked in camphor, a cooling compress for overheated foreheads, apparently favored by royalty too vain for fevers. A scroll rests nearby, its ends held down by small stones. You unfurl it carefully. The ink is still legible, the brush strokes thin and elegant. It describes a recipe for something called artichoren. A cold sesame honey paste meant to be stored underground in sealed jars. To be consumed during the warm winds of the east, when tempers rise and minds wander, the script advises. You smile. Practical, poetic, and delicious. It's then that you notice something odd. Behind the slab, built into the stone itself, is a slot, narrow, just wide enough to slide in a palm-sized object. A token-shaped object. The clay disc the scholar gave you. You hesitate only a moment before fitting it into place. There's a soft click followed by a whisper of moving air. A panel in the stone wall shifts open, revealing a staircase spiraling downward. You descend. The air cools further, the scent now sharper, mint, myrtle, old paper, and thyme. Your steps echo, but muffled. The walls are smooth, curved like the inside of a shell. At the bottom, you find something unexpected. A room. Small, circular, and filled with softly glowing glass orbs. Each orb floats in a suspended shelf of thick wool-lined recesses. These aren't lights, they're vessels. Inside each, a frozen fragment of some substance, a few drops of oil, a sliver of preserved fruit, a wisp of vapor. This was a memory vault. A cryogenic library. Not of people, but of sensations. One orb contains chilled vinegar from an ancient feast. Another, a snowflake pressed in rosewater from a wedding. Yet another contains just air scooped, labeled, and sealed from the rooftop of a summer palace in Shiraz during a particularly fragrant night. It's poetic and absurd, beautiful and obsessive. Historians still argue whether these scent libraries were real traditions or just romantic myths. Some say they were rituals for grieving families preserving the smells of the deceased. Others claim they were training tools for elite perfumers handed down in secret. You lean close to one labeled First Rain over Parthian Earth. The orb emits no light, no sound, but somehow you know what it is. You imagine the moment, the sudden coolness, the earth sighing, the scent of dust and promise. It nearly brings tears to your eyes. You sit for a long time. No one interrupts. No guides, no maps, no whispers. Just you and these impossibly intimate artifacts of a civilization that didn't just try to survive the heat, they turned it into art. Eventually, you stand. You don't need to take anything with you. You climb back up into the dome of jars. The secret panel clicks shut behind you. It's almost like it never opened at all. Outside, the sky has softened. The air hums with the electricity of late afternoon. You begin walking again, no path this time. Just a sense of direction. The kind that comes when you're no longer looking. In the distance, the silhouette of another dome. Taller. More angular. Surrounded by something that looks suspiciously like wind towers. And maybe, just maybe, the sound of music. Your journey continues. The wind towers rise like solemn sentinels in the glowing haze of sunset. You approach slowly, your sandals kicking up little puffs of sand that dance briefly, then vanish. This dome, taller and grander than the others, hums gently with motion. Not mechanical. Not human. Just air. The courtyard surrounding it is different too. No bazaar, no scholars, no whispering families. Just a series of rectangular pools set in perfect symmetry reflecting the towers above like upside-down minarets. A few lazy date palms lean toward the water, their fronds sighing in rhythm with the breeze. You stop to dip your fingers into one of the pools. The water is cool. Miraculously cool. Before you stands the entrance, arched, carved with patterns that loop and fold like frozen gusts. A slab above the door reads, in Persian, to catch the sky and bottle the wind. Inside, the air changes immediately. No fan, no motor, no magic. Just design. The passageways funnel the wind, yes, wind, down from the towers into the chambers below. It's silent but powerful, like nature is sighing directly into your bones. You let it wash over you. You've arrived at the Wind Temple, one of the grandest Yakshal-adjacent structures ever built. A place that didn't just preserve ice, it made comfort out of architecture. As you wander through the chambers, you begin to understand. This wasn't just for storing food or cooling ink. This was climate control. A physical poem written in bricks, using nothing but airflow, shade, and stubborn human brilliance. Historians still debate who truly mastered the badger, these Persian windcatchers. Some credit the Zoroastrians. Others say it was desert merchants. Still others believe the designs predate them all, passed from Mesopotamian cities now buried in dust. What no one debates is their genius. The tower mouths face in different directions, each one catching even the faintest breeze. As air funnels down, it cools by moving over water in subterranean channels, sometimes leading straight into a Yakshal chamber. Other times, the breeze simply curls around the thick, lime-coated walls, dropping temperatures by as much as 20 degrees Celsius. And here's the real marvel, all this was built without a single piece of metal. No screws. No fans. Just clay, stone, and understanding. You move through one chamber after another, each with its own temperature, scent, and sound. Some hold cool basins of rosewater, their surfaces rippling like liquid silk. Others contain amphorae stacked like sleeping elephants, sealed tight with wax and cooled by the wind. In one alcove, you discover a lounge space, yes, really lined with thick cushions. A low stone table sits in the center with a delicate porcelain pot of mint tea. It's somehow still warm, and yet the room remains perfectly cool. You sit. As you sip, a note tucked beneath the teapot catches your eye. Written in quick, careful script, it reads, "Rest here if the heat has been long. You are not alone. You never were." You let the words settle over you. Was this temple built for royalty? Traveling sages? Tired farmers? Maybe it doesn't matter. What matters is that it still works. Centuries later, and the walls still breathe. The sky still cools. The air still moves. No apps required. This, you realize, is not just architecture, it's philosophy. You lie back on the cushion. Above you, the ceiling narrows into a dome of open slats that point skyward. Through them, stars have begun to appear, silver crumbs scattered across velvet. One star blinks more insistently than the rest. No, wait. It's not blinking. It's flickering like a flame. You sit up. There's another chamber, tucked behind a curtain of reed matting. As you part it, your eyes adjust to a soft glow, candles. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all reflected in polished brass trays, multiplying the light into something golden and slow. A single figure kneels in the center, drawing lines on the floor with a thin stylus dipped in ash. He doesn't look up, but he speaks. You made it to the cool place. Few do. You step closer. The lines form a map, not of roads or rivers, but of airflows, currents, whispers, entire wind systems traced like veins through a body. He finally looks at you. His face is creased but kind. "They thought we were mad," he says. "Said you can't draw wind. Can't map what won't stay still." He gestures at the diagram. "But we did. We had to. Or melt." You nod. Somehow you understand. The same way you understood the frozen rosewater scent, or the ice-cooled ink, or the bone-dry quince rind for a sour heart. You're not just learning facts. You're learning how to cool a world with memory. The old man offers you a brass stylus, smoothed by time and shaped perfectly for your grip. Without speaking, he gestures to the opposite side of the floor. There, a blank slate of fine ash awaits your hand. The candles flicker in rhythm with your breath as you crouch and draw your first line. It begins as a simple curve. Then another. Soon you're sketching your own map, not of land, but of sensation. Of how the wind shifted that afternoon in the date orchard. Of the way cool air curled under the archway when you first entered the wind temple. Even the sound of your own breath becomes a thread on this strange, invisible cartography. The old man watches, then nods, satisfied. He speaks again. We call it Naqshband, the pattern of the wind. You smile because of course they had a word for this. Historians still argue whether these diagrams were spiritual or scientific. Some say they were ritual meditations. Others insist they served practical purposes. Recording wind flow to design better cooling systems. A fringe theory suggests they were used as blueprints to speak to the wind itself, invoking favorable breezes or stillness when needed. Whatever the truth, your lines now belong to the pattern. You feel them settle into the ash like a promise. The man motions for you to follow again, and together you enter a side corridor, low-ceilinged and warm with the scent of baked lime. You brush your fingers along the wall, it's rough and powdery, yet somehow still cool. The corridor bends once, twice, then opens into a cylindrical chamber. In its center is a spiral of stone steps descending into darkness. This is the deep shaft, he explains, the coldest point of the entire system. Where water once flowed beneath the yakshal and air currents were most tightly harnessed. You're descending not just into the earth, but into the very lungs of this ancient technology. Step by step, the temperature drops. You reach the bottom and find an underground cistern. Bone dry now, but once it held pure snowmelt, funneled from distant mountains by aqueducts carved with staggering precision. The aqueducts, called qanats, were the secret veins of Persia's desert life. Some stretched for miles, sloping ever so slightly downhill to maintain gentle, gravity-fed flow. You kneel beside the empty basin, fingertips brushing the smooth stone. There's a smell here mineral-rich and ancient, like petrichor before the storm has even arrived. The old man hands you something, a small seal jar. Inside it, a piece of saffron-soaked cloth. For the journey back, he says. Open it when the heat returns. You pocket it. And then he is gone. Not in a puff of mystery, just quietly back up the stairs, leaving you in the cool silence of centuries. You rest a moment longer in the stillness. The air is so still now, you can hear your pulse echo. You imagine what this chamber looked like, filled with snowmelt, lined with jars of pomegranate syrup and pressed grape molasses, preserved against a brutal summer that would not arrive for months. You picture a young servant, maybe 12 years old, descending the same stairs with a clay amphora. His job, to collect cool water for a guest. Maybe a visiting poet. Maybe a tired traveler who, like you, had walked across a burning plain and found sanctuary in wind and stone. You wonder where that boy is now. Or where he lies beneath the sand. On the way back up, your legs burn, but the air keeps you cool. You emerge into the candle chamber, now empty, save for the echo of your steps and the fading scent of wax and dust. You step outside. The sky is fully dark now. Stars spill across the firmament, uncaring and immense. And yet the air around you still, somehow, is kind. As you walk away from the wind temple, a soft breeze follows you. You pause and smile. You think, for just a moment, that the temple is breathing you out. You begin heading back across the desert. Except this time, it doesn't feel quite like a desert anymore. You walk beneath the stars now, no torches, no lantern, just the moon above and the wind gently guiding your steps. It's the kind of night that makes time feel irrelevant. The sand cools beneath your feet. Somewhere, a jackal yips once and falls silent. The stars, once scattered in wild constellations, seem to arrange themselves into more familiar shapes, arches, domes, aqueducts. Your mind is full of wind towers and deep shafts and the whispered lines of Naqshband. It's as if your journey has reshaped the very sky. In the distance, you spot a flicker of orange. A small village, unassuming, quiet, and, judging by the rows of stubby domes, full of its own modest yakshals. You arrive at a courtyard where women sit grinding herbs and a man with a crooked smile waves you over to share roasted chickpeas. The children eye you sleepily from woven mats, half asleep under mosquito netting. No one asks your name. You're simply welcomed. You sit down beside the old man. His turban is loose, his hands deeply lined. He offers you a tin cup of something cool and faintly sweet. You sip. It's vinegar water, sekanjaban, a traditional cooling drink made of sugar, mint, and aged vinegar. A flavor both surprising and perfect after a day of dry heat. He speaks. You've been to the tall one. The wind place. You nod. He chuckles. People always go there thinking it's about ice. It's not. You wait. It's about remembering, he says. The people who made those places? They were the kind who refused to let heat steal their stories. Historians still debate whether communities like this one, small, humble, spread across ancient Persia, truly understood the science of their own innovations. Were they designing with intent? Or copying ancestral patterns whose principles they only half grasped? Maybe it doesn't matter. You wander from the courtyard into a small communal building where the walls are painted with faded murals. Scenes of harvests and stars and mythic creatures with swirling tails. One catches your eye, a woman balancing a jar on her head, a child holding a fig, and beside them, a structure that looks suspiciously like a yakshal but it's shaped like a beehive. This version is shorter, wider. A local variant, perhaps. A regional tweak. You realize that ice storage wasn't a one-size-fits-all solution. Across Persia and even beyond into parts of Central Asia, the Horn of Africa, and ancient Armenia, each community built cooling systems to suit their soil, water tables, and winds. You hear a faint thrum behind the mural wall. Curious, you step outside again and round the structure. There, partially buried in the ground, is a tiny wind catcher, no taller than you. It stands over a humble cellar where they still keep melon slices wrapped in palm leaves, cool and damp. A teenage boy is down there now, tying a cloth bundle closed with string. He looks up and grins. For market tomorrow, he says. Still cold, right? You lean down. The air from the cellar hits your face, cool and earthy with the faintest scent of ripe fruit. Still cold, indeed. You sit at the edge of the pit as the boy climbs out, brushing sand from his tunic. People think it's magic, he tells you. But it's not. It's stubbornness. Generations of stubborn people who didn't want to drink warm goat milk every summer. You laugh. Finally, someone said it. Later, you lie on the roof of a clay house, watching the stars again. The boy joins you, pointing out which ones guide travelers home and which ones to avoid because they always shift like liars. He asks where you're from. You answer vaguely. He doesn't press. Instead, he says, my grandfather used to say, we don't keep ice to stop time. We keep it so we can taste time later. You turn that over in your mind. Ice's memory. Ice's time captured in crystalline form. You reach into your satchel and unwrap the saffron cloth the old man gave you. It's dry now, but the scent remains strong, earthy, golden. You place it beside you on the roof like a small flag, a marker of where you've been. The wind shifts again. It brings no sand this time, just coolness and memory. Morning arrives not with fanfare, but with a hush. The desert does not wake in a rush, it stretches slowly like a cat warmed by stone. You blink awake on the rooftop as a thin peach-colored light spills across the mud brick walls. The boy from last night is already gone, off to the market, his fruit bundle in tow. A rooster crows somewhere far off, too lazy to really mean it. You sit up. Your back is sore, your mouth dry, but the air is still deliciously cool. You breathe in deeply, savoring the final moments before the heat makes its return. Down below, women sweep courtyards, shaking out rugs with practiced rhythm. A man hauls water from a small well only a few feet deep, lined with the same lime plaster you saw in the ancient cistern. These people may not call it a yakshal, but their lives are full of its wisdom. You descend a narrow staircase and find a simple breakfast waiting: flatbread, white cheese, a fig split open like a soft star. There's even a bowl of yogurt, and you smile, remembering how Persians once stored their dairy in ceramic pots cooled by airflow and shadow. Historians still discuss whether these methods were consciously engineered or passed down through trial and error. Was there a grand architect, or was it just generations of careful tinkering? It's possible we'll never know. What matters is they worked. They still work. After breakfast, you say your quiet thanks and step back into the desert. This time, you're not retracing your steps. Instead, you follow a new path, one used for generations, carved by hooves, sandals, and wheels. The Old Spice route. Your guide told you it once connected yakshals like beads on a string, each serving its region with icy defiance. You pass abandoned ones, now crumbling domes, their lime sheets peeling like eggshells. Vultures roost atop their broken wind towers. One has collapsed entirely, its deep shaft choked with sand. And yet even here, there's beauty in the decay. A kind of humility. These were never built to last forever, just long enough to help someone survive the heat or carry cold water one more mile. You kneel beside one of the ruins, brushing your hand across the old bricks. You can still feel their intention, not just function, but care. A design not only for comfort, but for preservation. Survival with grace. Suddenly, you spot something that's sticking out of the rubble. A fragment of painted ceramic no bigger than your palm. You wipe off the dust. It shows a fish blue, delicate, with golden dots along its back. And around it, faded script in Old Persian. You can't read it, but somehow you feel its meaning. You're holding a memory that once floated in cool darkness, perhaps beside a jar of snow. You place the shard back where you found it. No need to carry it. It's done its job. Further along, you find a small caravan halted beside a ruined caravanserai. Their camels rest in the shade, bellies pressed to the sand. A woman in a wide-brimmed straw hat waves you over. She offers you dried apricots and cool rosewater from a skin that smells faintly of goat. You sit with them for a while. They speak little, but their presence is companion enough. When they move on, you follow behind for a while. The wind at your back. Then, near midday, you finally arrive at the final dome. It's pristine. Restored. A small museum of sorts that you'd never guess it from the outside. A single yakshul gleaming pale against the copper dunes, its lime polish catching the light like a pearl. Inside, it's empty. No ice. No jars. Just silence. And a guide, seated on a stool in the corner, fans herself lazily. She looks up. We've been expecting you. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. Everyone comes here eventually. She gestures to the back wall where a mural stretches from floor to ceiling, an impossible blueprint showing Yakshul's past and future. You see versions with dome towers shaped like dervish hats, versions built from ice themselves, and one made entirely of glass. This one, she says, pointing to the glass one, was never built. Just a dream. You nod. Dreams can be just as important. Before you go, she adds, we have one last thing. She hands you a jar. Clear glass. Sealed tight. And inside? One perfect cube of ice. You stare at the jar. The ice cube inside is nothing spectacular. Slightly uneven, a few air bubbles, the kind of thing you might ignore in a modern drink. But out here, in the middle of a desert older than most empires, it feels like a miracle. It clinks faintly as the guide sets it into your hands. Take it with you, she says. But not too far. It's not meant to last. And that's the point, isn't it? The Persians never hoarded cold for eternity. They chased it, captured it briefly, and shared it. Ice wasn't just a luxury. It was a message: we can adapt. We can thrive. We can soften even the sun's cruelty with a bit of cleverness and clay. You step back outside, blinking in the bright noon. The desert presses in again, heavy and golden. You feel the ice jar cooling your palm, but already a thin sheen of condensation begins to fog the glass. The countdown has started. You walk slowly now, retracing the edge of the dunes. Far in the distance, caravans shimmer like ghosts. A goat bleats lazily. A hawk rides a thermal spiral above. Your thoughts drift back across the journey. Remember that first massive yakshul, how it loomed like a spaceship against the earth? Or the spiral wind catchers slicing the air with graceful defiance? And who could forget the young boy with the fig-sweet breath, proud of his pit-cooled melons? Even now, scholars debate how widespread these methods were. Did each community discover cooling on their own? Were there traveling builders, master architects of shadow and slope? Or did the ideas simply spread like whispers, passed by merchants with melting chunks of ice wrapped in straw? We may never know. But the legacy remains in clay domes, in palm frond shade, in the quiet sizzle of ice against copper. As you keep walking, the jar warms further. You sit beneath a lone acacia tree and open it just slightly. One drop lands on your wrist, startlingly cold, then instantly vanishes into the heat. You don't need to see the rest melt. You close the jar again and bury it gently in the sand beside the tree. Not as an offering, not as trash, just as a moment. The wind rises one final time, brushing the acacia leaves in a dry, rhythmic whisper. And that's when you realize something. This wasn't a story about ice. It was about ingenuity, about patience, about how ancient people looked at impossible landscapes and said, no, we're not leaving. We're building. And then they did, mud brick by mud brick, draft by draft, until they taught the desert to share a little mercy. You lean back and close your eyes. The fan you turned on at the start of the night hums gently now, as if in agreement. Sleep approaches, not in a rush, but with the slow elegance of cool air moving down a cannet, quiet and purposeful. Your breathing slows. Your thoughts soften. And though the desert sun still blazes in your imagination, you find yourself smiling. Because for just a moment, in a land that should have scorched memory from stone, you tasted snow. So now here you are, settled into stillness. The heat has faded. The wind has rested. And you curious traveler of ancient stories can finally let go of the trail. No more domes to marvel at, no more sand to brush from your sleeves. Just a body cooling into comfort, breath by breath, heartbeat by heartbeat. You've wandered through clay towers and underground tunnels, past saffron-scented doorways and fig-laden trees. You've seen ingenuity not in textbooks, but in shade and stone. And now those sights begin to blur gently at the edges like mirages easing into dream. Let them blur. Let them fade. This is your time to rest. Outside your window, perhaps there's a breeze. Or a hum. Or only stillness. That's fine. The world can wait. You've earned a long, uninterrupted sleep, one where ice never melts and the desert is always kind. So loosen your thoughts like old sandals. Let them drop. Sink now. Gently. Slowly. You're not chasing snow anymore. You've already found it.